So I guess I've been doing a bunch of content on Fuji lately and podcasts and kind of going off track what this channel was about. So in today's video, I just wanted to bring it back and we're going to jump in and do some editing. I'm going to use my Loupedeck CT, show you guys how I use it. I did a video on it a long time ago, but I've been using it for a few years now and I just can't edit without it. We're going to go through and see how I handle backlit situations and how I expose the photos. I'm going to have the settings up on the screen so you guys can see all that as well. Before we get into it, I'll just talk quickly about the gear I was using and some of the methods that I'm going to be editing with. So I was using the Sony A7IV and the 35mm 1.4 G Master. And I also had the Nissi Black Mist 1/8 strength filter on the front of it. My settings that I use for all this kind of stuff is always the same. I always use aperture priority with auto ISO, and the most important part is I have my shutter speed locked to a minimum of 1/250th of a second. Now if the shoot is a little bit faster paced, I might up that to 500th of a second, and I'm pretty much shooting everything at 1.4, but I will have the settings up on the screen so you can see how the camera behaves. And as far as metering modes go, I am using matrix metering, so that pretty much gets you, the average for the entire screen. Sometimes I do still shoot manual, but really only if I'm using like flash or if I'm in like a church and the lighting isn't changing at all. But for this kind of stuff, I'm really just relying on the camera, relying on the exposure that I'm seeing in the viewfinder and just adjusting with my exposure compensation dial. Otherwise, like I said, it's aperture priority, auto ISO, minimum shutter speed of 1/250th of a second, and then I just roll through. Generally, when I'm exposing in a situation like this, I'm trying really hard to not peak highlights because I just know that I can bring shadows right up with this camera and I'm not really going to have any issues. And because I'm at such a low ISO for most of this shoot, it's just not going to be a problem. And as far as editing goes, I'm just using my presets. You guys know I've turned my ads off on YouTube. I just find them really frustrating, and I really appreciate everybody that supports the channel by buying my presets. But if you want to check them out, there's a link in the description. So with that being said, let's just jump straight in and start editing. I'm just going to talk through it, and if you guys have any questions, drop a comment below and I'll address that in another video coming up really soon. I am also going to be addressing a lot of your questions that I get on my YouTube videos in my podcast series, so there's also a link to that in the description if you want to check out the new podcast. So that's enough rambling now. A lot of the information was kind of important, but the very first thing I do is chuck the main source on it. That's really the only preset I really ever use for my paid work, and I just adjust it to suit. But for some of the more creative stuff, I might use the mood one and obviously use the black and white one as well. So the thing with presets is, regardless of whether you're using my ones or anybody else's, you need to stick to a preset for a set. You can't be skipping around using different styles in a set because it needs to be consistent. So now that I know that I'm going to do that, I'm just going to go Command A to select all the files, and then Command Shift S to bring this box up. And I'm going to choose everything except for white balance and exposure. So we'll just go ahead and click synchronize, and now if we jump into the gallery mode, you're going to be able to see that the presets have all been applied, and most of the photos are going to require a little bit of a boost in exposure and possibly a white balance change. Most of the white balance changes we're going to make is going to be synced across a whole section of photos. So with my Loupedeck, I have it with this 7 and 8 key program to skipping the photos. So really when I'm going through and editing, especially with a wedding, my hands are like this. So I have my 7 and 8 to skip through the photos. I have exposure on this one, temperature on this one, tint. This is my rotate one, which is just such a time saver. There's no you don't have to activate it or anything like that. You just turn the dial and it rotates and crops in automatically. And then also on this side, I have my highlights and shadows. And then if you click in, it goes back to 0 basically. And then with the touchscreen panel, really the main ones I'm using is the virtual copy and paste, and the black and white preset. So for example, if I want this one in color and black and white, we'll just get the exposure right. White balance looks pretty good actually. And then we will do a virtual copy, and then I'll paste the black and white preset on there. And that's the new one in the pack. And yeah, as you can see, it didn't really need any exposure adjustments or anything. The black and white preset is made to work with the color presets as well. So moving on, here you can see the example I'm using of not trying to clip the highlights as much as possible. It's just kind of getting to know your sensor and learning how much you can pull back and how much you can lift without kind of ruining the image. It's just getting to know your camera. But you can see that cloud is, that sky is blowing out there. So, I'm just going to lean into that a little bit and just bring the highlights up a bit. It might sound counterintuitive, but you're going to see later on in the images coming up down here why I do that. And then I'm just going to go ahead, raise the shadows up a touch. And might be a little bit warm. Yeah, we'll go about there. I think that looks good. So now I can move on to the next photo. And as you can see, it's a little bit deceiving because I've synced my preset across all of these images already. So, it's not like you're seeing a raw file every time we skip one. So I guess sometimes I'll go through and reset it so you can see for yourself as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'm going to again do a virtual copy and then black and white. Nice. So this one, for example, if I reset it, so Command-Shift-R, that resets. This is a raw file straight out of the camera. Then I can go ahead and apply the main source to it. That's pretty much done, really. Lately, I have been converting my vertical files to 4:3, just because I think they look a little bit nicer. I don't know why, it's just a trend that I've been doing lately, but I'm only doing that for my portrait orientation images. So yeah, I'll carry on. Maybe that one will do a black and white as well. Nice. Another nice backlit shot. See, it's difficult with the sync, so maybe we will go through and just reset all of these and apply the preset one by one so you can see the before and after. So now you're going to be able to see all the raw files. I'll just keep going and editing them. Really the main thing I'm doing is like getting white balance right, and I will do a lot of copy and pasting, but one thing I don't like about this one is this tire track here, so I'm going to crop in to that one just there, and I like that. I go a little bit darker about there. Alright, so you can see here I've saved all the cloud detail, but it's quite dark. But honestly, it's just not a problem for Sony cameras. If I put the main source on and then bring it up straight in that horizon, bring the shadows up a touch, it looks great. That'll make a nice 16:9 black and white as well. So virtual copy, black and white, and then she'll go 2:1. I've been doing that lately as well. Nice cinematic look to it. Yeah, I like that. Right, next. This is how easy it is, guys, honestly. Some of these are a little bit too dark, like that one could have been a fair bit brighter, but it's the same story. You don't really need to worry about it with Sony cameras. I mean, any cameras really nowadays. The dynamic range is so good that it's just not a problem. Moving on. Main source. Bring those highlights down to get all that cloud detail back up there. So this is what I'm talking about when I was lifting the highlights a little bit, because if you look at the blown out bits there, you can't recover that, and if you try and do it and just bring the highlights down, you can get some kind of crazy like edges to the sun flare. So yeah, I'll show you what I mean, but we'll put the preset on there, bring that up. It's a little bit green, I think. Go about there. From now on, I'm going to copy that. So we've copied those settings, and then we can do that for this section. We can go ahead and paste those on, but normally, like I said, I would be syncing it, but I just want you guys to be able to see the before and afters. So we'll paste that on here. Done. And as you can see here, I just don't like that really fine ring around the sun there. So all I do is bring the highlights up a bit, and it just kind of, it's blown out anyway. So I'm just kind of flaring it out a little bit to make it not so obvious. And then bringing the shadows up a touch. And yeah, I really like that. So we'll copy that again and then move on to the next one. Man, these raw files straight out of the camera with that Pro Mist filter, it's so nice. So that's with the copy and paste. Yeah, nice. So virtual copy, and then we'll put a black and white on there as well. I really like that. So you can see what I mean there, that kind of ring around the bit, you know, like when you bring the highlights all the way down, you get a really sharp edge to the blown out bits. Whereas if you just bring the highlights up a bit and kind of like feather it out, it's just not as obvious. And like I said, it's blown out anyway, so it's just kind of making it as less obvious as possible, really. Another beautiful raw file here. We will start from scratch. So main source, bring that up, it's a bit green, so we'll add some tint, bring those highlights back up for those blown out bits. Yeah, beautiful. I might do a black and white and do that 2:1 crop again. Bring it all the way down, see what that looks like. Yeah, that's nice. Might add a little bit more contrast because of that Pro Mist. So let's start again and we'll do some copy and paste. Get rid of that green tint. Bring those highlights up. Yeah, that looks good. So now we will copy that. Move on to the next one. These are literally just copy and pasting. I'm not doing anything else. It's a good example. I could have definitely gone darker if I reset that photo. So like I said, if you bring the highlights all the way down, you can see the blown out parts here. But if I was to go much darker, I would have been, you know, there still would have been blown out bits, and I would have had a little bit more noise than I want in the images. So after bringing up the shadows, I mean. So yeah. Warm that up a little bit. This is all to taste as well. And 4:3. So yeah, I just think that looks better. I don't know, personal preference, I guess. You guys let me know in the comments if you prefer that 4:3 look for portrait orientation photos. Go black and white. Yeah, really nice. Such a nice evening. Sorry if I'm not talking all the way through this. I don't know if that's a bad thing or not, but do a virtual copy and another black and white there. And back down on the beach. Other than that, this is pretty much all I do, you know. There's really not much to it, as long as you're getting your exposure right and you know, trying your best so you can get kind of maximize the tones out of the sensor. You're always going to get nice colors. It is kind of important to remember as well that saturation is definitely linked to exposure. So the brighter you go, the less saturated the image is going to be, and same as the opposite. You know, the darker it is, the more saturation you're going to have. So it's just something to keep in mind there as well. I put this one in there because the clouds looked awesome, and I want to show you guys what I would do to kind of accentuate it. So I'm kind of gonna, this is called Lion Rock out at Piha, and I'm just gonna bring up, you know, get the exposure right for the mountain, and then I'm gonna pick the sky filter and, you know, the new feature in Adobe Lightroom, and then just, you know, it always works really well, I find. And then just bring those clouds like right down, get some of that dramatic action going on. Nice, that'd be a cool print actually. So that's it for this video, guys. Really appreciate you following along. Hopefully this one wasn't too long. I'll cut a bunch of stuff out to make it easier for you. But I'll see you guys in the next video really soon.